Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're so excited that you're here and very happy to have you online. My name is Audrey Morris, and I'm the Marketing Programs Manager here at Intellum, and I'm very excited to be joined by our guest speaker, Vanessa Alzate. She's joining us from South Florida. I'm joining you all from Southern California, and we'd love to know where you're joining us from. So please take a moment, drop that information in the chat, and we'd love to see where you're all from. So with that, I want to cover some housekeeping items, and then I'm going to turn the mic over to Vanessa. So first and foremost, as you heard when you joined the webinar, this webinar is being recorded. And lucky you, if you want to revisit it at any time, this will be sent to your inbox at the end of the session. So you'll receive the link to the recording if you want to pass that along. This will also live on Intellum's website as one of our captured webinars. So you always have an opportunity to revisit it. If you need closed captions, you can find those at the bottom of your screen. Please, like I said, take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. And also at the bottom of the screen is a Q&A box. So we'll sift through your questions at the end of the session. Be sure to send your questions to the Q&A box, your intros to the chat. We want to make sure to keep those separate so that we don't lose any of your questions. We want to make sure to be able to address those at the end. Also at the end, you'll receive a survey about the webinar. So if you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to just complete that survey, that allows us to get more information from you and to make sure that we're presenting with information that you actually care about, you want to make use of, you can apply to your work. So we want to hear your feedback. So please take a moment to complete that survey. All right, now let's dive in. I'm very excited to be turning the mic over to Vanessa Alzate, who's the CEO of Kirkpatrick Partners, and she's going to walk us through this model that many of you may have used, may be familiar with, may not know anything about. So again, let us know in the chat if this is brand new information to you or if you're like Kirkpatrick for life. So with that, Vanessa, I'm going to turn the mic over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, everyone. How are you? I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. On the screen is a QR code to a companion guide for our session. Not a requirement, just a nice to have. And so while you all are scanning that, I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. Yes, I'm Vanessa Alzate, the owner and CEO of Kirkpatrick Partners. This month I am celebrating my 2-year anniversary with Kirkpatrick Partners since the acquisition. Like I shared with my affiliates and facilitators this morning, some days it feels like 2 minutes, some days it feels like 20 years, but all in all, it's been an amazing opportunity. And I mean, I have Dr. Don Kirkpatrick slide transparencies from when he used to facilitate the Kirkpatrick model in my garage. I feel like I have a piece of learning and development history that I have to treat like as if I'm an archivist, at a museum. But really just couldn't believe that I am here. The Kirkpatrick model has always been so near and dear to my heart. My background has been in instructional design. I've been in the learning space since 2009. I saw Pam is here joining us. She and I have a colleague where we work together back in our CRM software training days, which is really where I got my start. And from there went on to a bunch of different organizations supporting in onboarding, organizational development, and all of the things before going out on my own in 2018 with Anchored Training because I decided to have 2 kids 1 year apart and could not work full time and freelance full time at the same time with 2 under 1. Who knew you couldn't do those 2 things? But all in all, a blessing. The girls are amazing, but also it led me here to Kirkpatrick Partners. Why Kirkpatrick? For me, the Kirkpatrick model has always been that thing that I could always have a conversation with my customers about when it came to evaluation because it's a simple, flexible framework. I've worked across industry sectors from private to public, government, for profit, all of the things. And this was the model I knew I could have I had that flexibility to be able to evaluate their programs. Just yesterday in a call with our federal government, and they said, we don't necessarily need to measure ROI, but we do need to know things like are we saving, lives being lost and things like that? That all gets bucketed in that level 4. So it really does help to have that flexibility. And so when I saw that Wendy had the business on the market, I said, it'd be great to include that in our under my belt and in the brand. And also, I wanted to take the model and give it a modernization for today. I love taking legacy things and modernizing them and making them future proof. And so I'm doing a little bit of that today. So that's enough rambling about me. Also, I'm in South Florida. I think it was Nina is in Fort Lauderdale. I'm in Parkland, so not far from you. Anybody else in the South Florida area, please, everyone should be connecting with me on LinkedIn, but if you're in the South Florida area, let's maybe meet up one day. It would be great. I love making new friends. I'm originally from New Jersey, so this will be great. All right, let's get started. So I would love to know from you all, you can pop it into the chat. How many of y'all are familiar? Raise your hand, do like the reaction emojis. I'm seeing them fly up. I've seen some hearts. Thank you, friends, for giving me those reactions. How many of y'all are familiar with this version of the Kirkpatrick model? I've got some thumbs up. I've got some hearts. Thank you to my friends that are giving me hearts. Awesome. It seems like a decent amount of you are familiar with this version of the Kirkpatrick model. Well, just a little bit of background from those of you who may not be as familiar with the Kirkpatrick model. The model was created, the design of it started back in 1954 with Dr. Don Kirkpatrick. He was actually a management consultant. He had a training program for supervisors, and he had this question: is my training actually even making an impact? And so as he was working on his dissertation, that was his the question he was trying to solve for, and he came across the work of Dr. Raymond Katzel, which had this sort of framework, and he used that and adopted it to create this framework for how he was going to evaluate the effectiveness of his training program. And so from there, years later, ASTD, which we all know now as ATD, came to him and said, "Hey Don, can you write an article for our magazine on the model?" And he said, "Sure, I'll actually do you one better. I'll write 4. One on reaction, learning, behavior, and results." And the interesting thing from there is that Don never actually coined them levels from the beginning. And he didn't even necessarily order them start, this and move on up. It was really what we call the industry model. From those articles, folks took that and coined it the Kirkpatrick model, and then it kind of snowballed into the model that we know today. So when we say at Kirkpatrick Partners, this is, the industry's model, we really do believe it. This model, though, has evolved, but before we get to that next evolution, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, speaking the same language when it comes to the vocabulary that we use to talk about the 4 levels, because there have been some adjustments to the definitions first and foremost. So, level 4 results. Level 4 is the degree to which targeted organizational outcomes occur as a result of the training and subsequent support and accountability package. We'll get to what those support and accountability package means. Level 3 behavior is the degree to which participants apply what they learned during training when they are back on the job. Level 2 learning is the degree to which participants acquire the intended knowledge, skills, attitude. Now, this is where one of the updates, the big updates have been made, but also confidence and commitment based on their participation in training. Why confidence and commitment? So there's these, some questions and pieces that we put into the methodology and to how we train on the model that we always call a 2.5 or a 3.5 question. These are early predictors of what is going to happen in the next level. Confidence and commitment are 2 of those things. You can gain all the knowledge, all the skills, the right attitude you need to perform those behaviors when you're back on the job. But if you don't have the confidence that you're going to have the support to do it, if you don't have the confidence that you can do it, maybe without guidance on your, on your own, or you're not committed because, you don't really have that sort of support on the job, right? that learning will not transfer to behavior. And so when we do our evaluations and we look at confidence and commitment in particular, we're able to see and say, you know what, there's an issue with commitment here. Let's dig into what the issue might be with commitment and maybe deploy some additional support they might need to get them boosted towards actually committing to transferring that learning to behavior, and vice versa with confidence. The next one is level 1 reaction. So we all know this as smiley sheets, right? It probably gets the worst rap of them all, but I actually really do love it. And it was Dawn's favorite level. So level 1 reaction is the degree to which participants find this training favorable, engaging, and here's the other change, and relevant to their jobs. This is where, you know, some of the model really, this level, I should say, really got some of that bad rap, right? Where we might find something like favorable and engaging, like that's all great. But the fact is, if we're not finding it relevant and something I can actually see myself applying, and I find that with them, I'm not going to actually apply any of that learning to behavior. And this is where we really do need to measure that relevancy. I mean, raise your hand if you've ever been in a training where you were like, why am I here? This is nothing to do with what I do. I've had a few. I think we've all probably been there. And so, you know, did you actually transfer any of that learning to behavior? No, not really. And so that's what we're trying to measure, right? Because it also really helps tell us as learning professionals, like, we need to do a better job of understanding that target audience of who actually needs to perform these behaviors to then create the curriculum from there. Now, those are not the only changes. The entire model visual has changed. So raise your hand now if you've ever seen this version of the Kirkpatrick model before, or like thumbs up, a heart. I have confetti. Love it, love it. Okay, we significantly dropped the number of reactions to 2 from like a lot more before. Okay, a third one, but it's a shocked emoji, so maybe everyone's shocked. So this is the updated version of the Kirkpatrick model as updated by Dr. Jim Kirkpatrick, Don's son, and Wendy Kaiser Kirkpatrick, Don's daughter-in-law. This is done back in around 2010, and there's been a few iterations over the years. So what we have here is, this is our go-to visual for the model. And why? Why do we use this centralized version? We looked at, you know, what actually makes all of this work, right? Like, what is the most important level? Yes, level 4 results, absolutely important, and the first thing we need to know. However, level 3 behavior is really where a lot of that magic is going to happen. And we wanted to really pull your eyes towards level 3 and towards behavior, so that it gave you that visual of, this is where we need to be spending more of our time. Right? And so, you know, you see that we've got a few different things here. We've got on level 4 results, you know, there's sort of 2 areas of results that we're measuring. One is the organizational outcome, which is the mission of the organization, right? And this is where we are saying that this is those longer term, you know, 2-year sort of retrospectives of whether or not the training had an impact and it helped to achieve something towards the mission of the organization. But then we've got leading indicators, and these are your short-term indicators of whether or not your program is on the right track for making impact towards that longer-term result, right? So if you ever think of like short-term wins, long-term gains, your organizational outcome, that's your long-term gain. Your leading indicators, these are your short-term wins. They're going to tell you that you're on the right track, right? And, you know, I know for myself, you know, it's really hard. I'm not patient at all as a human at all. And so waiting that 2 years to see the results can be really difficult. So I'm the type of person, like, I really love to see progress, right? Like, I'll write a to-do list and I'll put something on it that I already did, just so I get the satisfaction of crossing it off, like ate breakfast, done, right? These leading indicators are kind of like that, right? These are things that you can observe more quickly so you can start to ensure that you're on the right track. The nice thing about those, they give you so much information and data about what's happening on the job that you might need to go in and adjust and support so you can adjust those leading, so you can help to influence those leading indicators to ensure that you're protecting your training investment towards that final mission. So in the middle, we've got, level 3 behavior. I will say it now, I'll probably say it again 100 times, my favorite level, because this is where we actually work with people, we find out what they are doing on the job, and we're helping to provide them with support. So the first ring after level 3 behavior is critical behaviors. After defining the organizational result, the next most important thing that we need to define are those critical behaviors, right? We need to know what are those observable and measurable behaviors that we need to be creating training with in mind, right? Like around that we need to be monitoring on the job, that if these things are done, are going to achieve, are going to move those leading indicators in the directions that we are looking for, right? To then achieve that organizational outcome. So this is where we have to get very specific, and this is where it can get hard. A lot of folks will say to me, especially with like the soft skills, right? Like, how can you measure if someone is empathetic? And it can be done. It just takes a little bit more time. Like, we all know when we can sense and observe that someone is being empathetic, it's a little bit harder to define, but it really is taking that time to define what are the things that leader, let's say, is doing to show empathy, and that's what we're developing the training towards. That's what we're going to observe, and that's what we're going to be monitoring, right? That next ring around that is what we call required drivers. These are drivers that are going to monitor, reinforce, encourage, and reward those critical behaviors. So earlier I was talking about support and accountability package. These are the tools, that are the components that we'll need in order to provide support for those critical behaviors to happen on the job, but also monitor that they're happening. And then on the left, or sorry, yes, left, right. I don't know my left from my right, y'all, sorry. No, do not take directions from me when you're driving. We've got levels 1 and 2 over here stacked on the left. Why is that? The reason that we stack them one on top of the other is because we really believe in order to maximize our investment in time, because we know that resources are finite, you should be measuring and evaluating levels 1 and 2 simultaneously, informatively in the learning experience, right? So instead of spending so much time and resources on level 1 and level 2, that you kind of lose out gas on measuring level 3 and level 4, which is really what our stakeholders care and want. We're saying, you know what, these two things can happen simultaneously. We can multi-purpose program a lot of sort of evaluation tools in order to get both of those things. And that's how you need to be spending your time. So next slide kind of already gave you, but when you are designing a program, you do want to consider level 4 from the beginning. The fact is that when we plan for evaluation, we need to plan starting at level 4, right? And identify that North Star, that goal. Then those leading indicators, then you can dive into the critical behaviors that you need to define that then influence to support level 4. Then you can design your learning and what kind of assessments are you going to need, right? If I'm teaching someone they're doing construction, they're redoing my neighbor's pool. If I'm creating a training on how to, dig the foundation to put a pool in, I am not going to provide them with a multiple choice test necessarily. I want to actually see them, right? I want to give them a sandbox to play in. I want to see them dig that hole for that pool to make sure I can say, yep, they've learned those skills. Now they can move on into the work environment, right? So it really helps to plan those things out. And then of course, level 1 reaction. Now, on the flip side of that, when you execute, what you're executing is from levels 1 to 4, where a lot of people, evaluation is done wrong is we start at level one and then hope that they kind of build and stack on each other, right? And eventually get to level four. I don't know if any of y'all have ever tried to like retrofit an e-learning course to be 508 compliant. I've had some customers ask me this in the past, and I say, you know what, if you don't design the e-learning module with accessibility in mind, it's actually cheaper and faster for you to just scrap the whole thing and redesign it, as opposed to trying to retrofit. And that's the same sort of concept here, right? If you're gonna start at one and hope you get to level four, not gonna happen. When you plan at four and then it influences the design of your program, which we're going to get to now, my new favorite part that we've added recently, that's where you can then get to that level four result. So, like I mentioned, this is one of our new favorite things. You know, as you heard earlier, I'm an instructional designer by trade, and you know, me and my friend Addie, we have some challenges, some similar challenges, right? Everyone says the Addie model is outdated, the Kirkpatrick model is outdated. I understand where she comes from, and I think that she's also misunderstood, right? And one of those misunderstandings is the fact that that evaluation, only happens at the end. When we take the process so literally, then yes, of course, it's going to look like evaluation happens at the end. However, in this process, to actually do it right, we need to bring evaluation up to the front, right? And understand what is that goal? What's that level four result we are looking for? And then we can flow through, right? Because that's going to inform design decisions. And, you know, is this even a training issue, right? Or is it probably just an email we should be sending our folks, right? Or some sort of other tool. Then I really think of evaluation as wrapping around the whole process and being part of it, right? Like constantly evaluating how are we doing and having the process be a little bit more iterative. Excuse me as I choke. I'm going to take a pause there, pop into the chat for any questions. But I'd love to hear more about your feedback on what we have so far. Excuse me.
Vanessa, we have several questions coming into the chat regarding access to the slide deck and access to the guide that you had the QR code to in the first screen. I've linked the URL to the guide, but it sounds like the PDF isn't loading for everyone. So what's possible in terms of resources that will be shared at the end?
What I can do is I can email you to go out with the link, the PDF as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. No worries. All right. Any other questions that we're seeing here? Oh, someone else in Fort Lauderdale. Hey. Let's see, I'm gonna scroll down. Good objectives are created with the results in mind. Absolutely, Jean. And also, with objectives, you know, really thinking about how are we creating objectives so they're actually measurable, right? So we've actually reframed how we discuss learning objectives. So, you know, we create a lot of curriculum here, and I tell my team, what are the performance objectives? Not the learning objectives, because I want people to actually perform when they leave our programs. And if understands is any of them, they know that I'm gonna send it right back and ask them to give me something that I can actually measure. So definitely when you're thinking about results and you're flowing with this process, you know, objectives really do change. Awesome. All right, let's move on. All right, I kind of already gave this one away, but for you all, what do you think, which level is most important? Level 3, Nina, my Fort Lauderdale friend. Colleen, level 3, absolutely. Yeah. If you plan for 4, you can get all the others. That's right, Pam. Absolutely. Level 3 truly is the most important level because of this. So while training sets the foundation, but organizational value is actually built on the job. It's built at level 3. And it's all about what are people doing when they learn on the job. So only 15% of training graduates will do what they learned in training. when they get back to the job unless there is support and reinforcement in place. And when there is a performance issue, 70% of the time, it's something in the work environment, or what we call now the performance environment, that is actually causing the issue. So something they don't know what to do is that there's some sort of barrier that is happening. So we often think of this as like no manager support, no psychological safety, no access to resources, or no ability to even apply the skills that we just learned, right? One of the analogies I give here is like we take folks out of training like we take a fish out of a fish bowl. We clean the fish up really nice, but then we never clean the fish bowl. We put it right back into the dirty fish bowl. So what happens? It gets dirty again, right? And so that's how I think of this this issue. Now, while training can absolutely provide knowledge, skills, attitude, confidence, and commitment, from there, it's all about the on-the-job environment. So this research comes to us from our friend Rob Brinkerhoff, and so he's a dear friend of ours. And so I asked him actually when I first came on board. I was like, Rob, we have this data quoted. I said, what's the update since 2006? I mean, I love the early 2000s, but we're in the 2020s. He said, in his research, he's actually not found a significant shift. That this is still the problem in organizations, and it's about the same numbers as well. So really, even in about, and this is going to be crazy to say, in about 20 years, in a few months, we're still dealing with those same performance issues. And I think part of that is, to quote one of my favorite books that I read every single January, Atomic Habits. James Clear, the author of the book, wrote, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." And so really thinking back to, why do we fail with evaluation, right? Like, why are we failing in the training environment and not translating learning to performance? It's not just about the training that's designed, it's about the system, right? And how can we support folks organizationally to actually be incentivized to perform those behaviors? And required drivers are one of those ways that we can do that. So required drivers are, we bucket them into two areas: support and accountability. I'm going to do the not so fun one first, although I do think that accountability is a gift, just like feedback. So we'll start first with accountability, and that is our monitoring bucket. And this is where, how are we going to know that these critical behaviors are even happening, right? And this is where we want to look at things like having dashboards, doing interviews, observations, self-monitoring, touch-based meetings, things like that, to monitor that these behaviors are actually happening. So often people think that to measure level 3, they should be doing it 90 days later, because that gives people time in order to actually perform those behaviors, right? And what they often do is just a survey to their manager or survey to them saying, hey, are you seeing these behaviors change? Here's the problem with that. When we have someone go through a training program one time and then expect them to commit that learning to memory and perform it at the optimal peak performance, that's not how our brains work. That's not how we create habits, right? We need repetition. We need to practice. We need those reinforcements. We need all the things that are happening in that support bucket. And if we wait for 90 days to evaluate what's happening out on the job, you've lost a lot of time. It's hard to get those folks back. So we actually, if you'd ask me, I would want to start evaluating pretty much immediately, but we recommend 30, 60, 90, right? Because 30 days gives people, enough time to maybe start. 60 days, they're practicing a little bit more, and then 90 days we'll really know more. Are they actually mastering, and what supports do we need to deploy? Now, I know that sounds like a lot of evaluation, but here is the beauty of data collection. There are so many ways to do it, and it does not just have to be a survey, right? And you're seeing some of them here, and I really recommend finding ways to be creative and multi-purposing your evaluation. Now, let's get to the best part of required drivers, which is support, right? And we have these into three buckets. Reinforcement supports. So these are things, again, that you're reinforcing what it is that you learned, right? So these are my favorite things: job aids, refreshers. I told you earlier, right? I was a CRM software trainer. I remember what we used to do, these big rollouts for pharma companies, and our pharmaceutical reps would, they're not in front of their computer all day. They're, with their iPad in front of doctors, calling on doctors, those sorts of things. If they don't know how to do something in the CRM system, they couldn't say, excuse me, I need to go back to my learning management system in order to find how to do this, like, find your, sign your to have you sign your signature. The doctor does not want to talk to them, and the doctor is off seeing a patient. In that time they only have 2 minutes to give their spiel and get their signature for the samples that they left. So instead, what we built are these quick reference cards, and we made them in Publisher. So I'm definitely dating myself there. And they were laminated, and you put them on the ring card, and we hole punched them. I'm gonna say, hey guys, slip this in your laptop bag, so then you can just quickly, it's just the key things that we knew they would need to do, and they don't do often enough that they would forget. Little did I know, at that time in my early career, fresh out of college, that what I was creating was a required driver. But that support tool ended up helping so many more of our learners than even the training that we did. And I'd like to think I was a pretty good facilitator. So those are the types of tools and supports. Sometimes it's not about that they didn't learn it. It's that they haven't done it often enough, so they forget. So they just might need a checklist. Some other reinforcement tools that we love to talk about are things like social learning. I'm big on community, micro learning, and utilizing drip feeds. And so what I love to talk about, and if anyone was at ATD and went to my last session on the last day, I talk about these learner arcs, right? We have learner personas. We also need to play like, okay, we have this persona. We want them to do something. We want them to essentially have a new identity by the end of this journey, right? So let's take a new manager, right? What are the things that they're going to need to do and when? And I almost think of it as like looking at a yearly calendar, and how can I drip out the learning that they need so that it comes out when they actually need it and close to when they are performing or supposed to be performing that behavior. New managers, right? We cram a whole bunch of stuff into their onboarding, and there's things like, performance reviews and interviewing and hiring and all of these things, but they may not be doing that for another year because you just came out of a performance review cycle, right? So they're going to forget this because they've learned. So instead, it'd be nice to have like a micro learn or nice module right before performance review time. That's good for everybody as a refresher, and good for those that need to actually learn the skill. All right, enough on reinforcements. Encouragement. So this is where coaching, mentoring, all of that plays in. And then we have reward. So this is where recognition, pay for performance, gamification, internal awards, all of that comes in. Here's the thing with rewards. People think that you have to spend a ton of money. You don't. A lot of times, all people want is recognition that you see them and you see that they're doing what it is that they're supposed to be doing. They just want that shout out, right? And there's things that you can do for no to low cost that will mean so much to your employees. And so I really encourage you to integrate more rewards. So with that, I would love to hear from you all. Which of these required drivers do you think you could implement more in your own role? If you want to pop that into the chat. Oh, thanks, Jean. Yes, it'll be interesting to apply AI to this process. Not saying that I'm working on a lot of AI, but I'm working on a lot of AI. Kelly says refresher training, Nina and Eliza say drip feeds. Yeah. Yeah, I'm a marketer at heart. My cousin told me before I went to college, it was like my older brother, I think you're gonna end up in marketing. And I was already going to the same college he went to, and I was like, I'm not gonna do that. And here, what's my love at the end of the day? Marketing. Should have just listened to him, but this is good too. I like to say learning and marketing are like cousins. Pam is for onboarding. I think group workshops are critical. Social learning, yeah. Client journey map. That's right, Alex. All teaching is in essence marketing. That's right. We actually had an organization that got rid of their L&D department, I found out, and they gave all the learning to their marketing department. Dimitri says, I love gamification when it's done right. Yeah, absolutely. When it's in the right context for the right folks, gamification can be really powerful. We've got a link in the chat to Amazon, which, you know, I'm my whole life is sponsored by Amazon. In our in-person class, I gave paper high fives and awesome citations, and it's a great way to give recognition. Love that. Awesome. I'm on the education team, which is the same department as marketing. I feel like I'm amongst my friends. Thank you all for indulging me in my love of marketing and learning. So where are you all currently spending most of your resources? Pop into the chat. Which level are you currently spending most of your time? To make sure I say this Amazon link. Kelly's saying teaching on level 2. Yep. E-learning, learning. Yep. Pam saying for SaaS, we need to partner with people who have data to do level 3 and 4. That is another myth of the Kirkpatrick model. So thank you, Pam, for sharing. Level 4, folks say, is the hardest one to measure. And we actually say it's the easiest to measure because someone else is likely tracking those KPIs. Now, where the challenge comes in is getting them to give you that data and not wonder, hold so tight on that data and ask, what are you doing with that data, right? And so, that's where really when we talk about building business partnerships and building relationships with other stakeholders, that is really part of the reason why, not just to not be order takers, but to also help to understand how by them sharing this data with you, it's going to help them and the organization as a whole. Sean says that we're identifying behaviors, measuring is hard. Dimitri says that level 1, we just send surveys out, but don't even review results. It's a slow burn for us to get this going. Oh, I totally understand and feel you. It can definitely, be hard. And I appreciate your honesty and transparency and sharing that, that you're not necessarily always reviewing results. I had a podcast, we have the Kirkpatrick podcast with one of our customers, and she said, we used to, when it was the paper forms, we used to do the paper form evaluations, and it used to go in a drawer, and we would honestly never look at it. And I think that's so similar in so many organizations, because here's the other thing. A lot of times we get the results and then we're like, okay, so what do I do with it, right? Like SurveyMonkey is not giving me any sort of feedback on what to do, right? Forms is not telling me, it's just aggregating the data. And so there's a lot of definitely challenges with that, but we are here to help you for sure. Jennifer gets the gold star of the day. We look at level 4 as ROE, return on expectation. So in the Kirkpatrick world, ROE is actually our ultimate indicator of value. So yes, if ROI is one of those indicators that we need to be tracking, we'll calculate ROI, right? Like that's another myth, that it needed to be added as another level. That's not true. However, does not fit for every organization, right? And it's so hard to try to isolate. And it's this myth that we have to isolate. We can isolate training as the one thing that made this change. Training is not the only thing that someone needs in order to actually perform behaviors. It's a whole host of things that is what is going to change those indicators. And there's a whole other thing that you don't necessarily influence, the environment, right? I don't influence whether or not the economic market is up or down, right? I wish I could, but I can't, right? And so for us to say that training is the one thing that caused that 25% increase, that is so that's not real life, or it's hard to really hang your hat on that. Feels like we're trying to make an ROI calculation out of Swiss cheese data. But what I can do is identify what are my stakeholders' expectations of what's going to happen. And then because we deploy this intervention, here is how we met up with that. So Colby shares, I would just wish more people would complete the survey at 30 or 60 days. Yes, survey fatigue is real. Response rates, can be challenging. We definitely can get into a whole bunch more stuff on that for sure. And so he does ask, what can we do if learners don't engage with surveys? There's a lot of questions I have about surveys. I'm going to give you like the top on that of some things that I look at. So I could do a whole hour on this, but one is I would love to see the length of the survey, right? So oftentimes that we ask a lot of things because we feel like this is our one time that we're going to get them and they're going to answer all the questions. And there is a drop off, right? Like after a certain number of questions, participants are like, I'm out, this is way too much. Second is another thing I would want to look at is again, like what are the questions that you're asking? I could probably cut a lot of questions from a lot of surveys because we don't actually believe that participants should be evaluating facilitators because they're not qualified, right? They don't know what the rubric is that we should be holding that facilitator to. There's questions that we should absolutely ask about the facilitator, but we really need to limit those. And honestly, if there's a problem with your facilitator, your open text, catch-all, any other feedback, they will put any feedback on there about the facilitator. The other thing that I would have to ask is, again, are there other questions that you can get the answer to in other ways? I had a conversation the other day with a customer and they said, well, I want to know, is a mixed group. I'm in operations. I want to know, was the lunch good, right? Because then that's going to shift how I order next time. And I was like, you could ask that on the survey, or the facilitator can ask because it's an in-person, and they could just report back to you if there were any sort of issues, right? Or if they would want anything else, and it's a little bit fresher in their mind. And that seems like a more appropriate use. And then my last one is how often do you actually return back response to those that have provided feedback, right? So really closing the loop is another huge reason for survey fatigue. We fill out so many surveys and get nothing in return for all the response that we provide that it feels like I'm giving you an exchange of my time, my energy, my opinion. And in return, I'm not seeing any sort of difference. So I'm going to move on because again, like I said, I could go on a really long time on surveys. And I just want to get to a few more slides to open up to the rest of your questions. So the main point here is we want you to focus on the most important level. So level 4, what you want to do with level 4 is use this as your level to monitor and adjust. So if you notice there was that big gold box between levels 3 and 4, the beautiful thing about the new integration of levels 3 and 4 is that it's not just about evaluating, after the fact, it's about continuous monitoring and adjusting so that you're not creating training and then, it failed, so now I have to go redo the whole thing, right? You're creating training and saying, maybe I need to deploy a couple of support things to ensure those behaviors are happening on the job, but you're monitoring what is happening in the performance environment through those KPIs. Level 3 is where most of your efforts should be focused. And I could honestly tell you that from a time perspective, creating reinforcement and support tools is a lot less expensive and time consuming many times than like a really big instructional design, holy grail of programs. Level 2, we really recommend that you use that to evaluate this level by bridging levels 2 and 3. So really focusing on confidence and commitment. And then level 1, the least important level. It's not going to tell you enough that's going to actually give results that the organization wants, but it is the most evaluated. And so, if you can take anything from today is really think about, I would first start, especially those that are really just at level 1, start by reversing the order and to plan, right? And then you can see how it might be a little bit easier to measure because you're not just starting at 1 and hoping to get up to 4, right? I've got the 4 and I'm planning back down. So while I start looking at the chat for questions, I would love to hear from you all. What is one thing you plan to do to refocus your energy on level 3 behavior or on the job performance? And I'm going to pop into the Q&A. Let's see. Can you email us a slide deck after the webinar? I can. Melinda, how do you conduct level 3 when learners are from another company? We create and sell learning to clients and would love to conduct level 3 and 4 assessments, but the employees do not work for our organization. Do you have any resources for this situation? So yes, there are tools out there that help you sort of engage with participants after the fact through like nudging, text messages, sending emails, and things like that. Um, and it's built into how the curriculum, like your curriculum design. So I would recommend doing that. I guess another question I have now that my head is spinning on that, when you say you create and sell learning to clients, are you saying like you're a consultant that does custom learning and you provide it to your customers, or do you like sell off the shelf? Because that's also, so if you want to just pop that into the chat, I can clarify a little bit more for that. Brian shares, is there a best practice for letting learners know that they will be evaluated 30, 60, 90 so they know what to expect and can buy in? Should they agree to the 30, 60, 90 evaluations before they're allowed to take the training? Also, what level of management support should be sought to encourage buy-in? Okay. So best practice is to just tell them, right? Hey, you should expect that you are going to be receiving an email 30, 60, 90 days. Here's what it's going to look like. I may even pop up, like if I already have it designed, this is the text you're going to see, or this is what the email is going to look like, so they know what to look for. So that's part of it, right? Should they agree before they're allowed to take the training? No. So I think it's going to create just another barrier that we have so many challenges and barriers in front of us. I wouldn't add another one. And then what level of management support should be sought to encourage buy-in? The maximum level of management support. Managers are so crucial, right? For our work, for the organization in general, don't get me wrong, but I'm going to be selfish and talk about our work. We need managers to be the ones that are providing the space for folks to learn, practice, to grow, right? To be our champions as well, and our support in those required drivers. Some of those required drivers that you saw, we're not the ones that are executing that, right? The managers have to help us do that. Evaluation and learning is a team sport, right? We may be the architects of the plays. However, we are not the only executors of those plays. So if you've seen any of my things, like podcasts or whatever, you know that I love to go on a football analogy when it comes to learning, and I am not always. I am not about the football guru, although I am now playing one on TV. Why I say this one, Tom Brady is the greatest of all time, but he had a whole team around him, right, that helped to provide him support. He had coaches, he had his own, coaches, and supports, and he had all of these things in order to help him perform. Think of that like Bill Belichick was his manager, right? He needed Bill Belichick to be the greatest, right? And that's what our managers need to realize, is that their employees need them. The problem that we have is that we promote managers because they're good at jobs, not because they're good at managing people. When I can crack that code, I will let you all know. When there is some sort of pillar or something, it's really just about buy-in and having us all really share more in this message and just really talking more about it. Let's see. Yeah, Jennifer, managers forget that learning goes beyond the classroom. I think that another challenge that we have too is that everyone comes, we're in an interesting space. Everyone has learned, right? We've all gone to some form of school, right? So we assume, because that's how we learned growing up, that's how adults also learn, and that's how actual all learning happens, right? And so we try to equate like this school model in the same, this like corporate workplace learning model, and they're not the same. They don't work. So I think I got distracted by Fred's comment. But so I think that that's also a challenge that we have to face, is that people come with preconceived notions of how everybody needs to learn. And that's also not the case. And Fred, you're correct. Bill Belichick without Brady was not so wonderful, but Brady without Bill Belichick had a very good season until he didn't. But then he also had great coaches. Well, here we go. My daughter's name is Giselle and my dog is named Gronk. You see what team we liked. Okay. I am going to just move on to a couple more slides and then grab some more questions from you all. Please keep them going into the chat and or in the Q&A, please. So our key to success, when we make evaluation optional, it doesn't happen. So for those that were, I think it was Melinda, right, that was asking about when it's client facing. So I get this question a lot from consultants. Like, but no one wants to do evaluation. They cut that out of our contracts. And so I said, well, why are you putting it as a line item where it does look like, in the negotiations they could take it out. Instead, you want to bake evaluation into your process, into your package, where you can't just pull it out. It's no longer optional. It becomes a requirement, but you have to also sell it to them in how is it going to benefit them. It's not just about me gaining data and insights to grow my consulting business, right? It's about me helping you, saying, I spent this money, CFO, on bringing them in to create this training, and here is the return that we got because of it, right? So next time you need more money, or they're looking at you and saying, you've got to cut something, you can say, look at all this value that I bring to the organization. Maybe you need to go look somewhere else because I'm bringing a lot of value. You should be giving me more money. So when we make it optional, it does feel like something we don't necessarily have to do. So it's really about weaving evaluation into the fabric of your team, of your processes, of your systems, right? And letting evaluation be part of your operating system. So how do you do Kirkpatrick right? Design with the end in mind, right? Making sure we're taking that level 4 result and we're using that as the North Star. And so when you're designing not just your solution, your training, but you're designing with your required drivers, you're designing with evaluations. You could also bake evaluation into your entire process where it all becomes this seamless, holistic experience. Make sure you're creating value at level 3 and also, of course, require continuous evaluation. A couple of quick notes, and I'll get back to some questions. We're always here to support you. First and foremost, we have the Kirkpatrick Summit. It is in Dulles, Virginia, September 9th to 11th this year. It is going to be, if you've ever been part of a hackathon, that is what we're doing on the 10th and the 11th. It is going to be all about prototyping solutions so that you can create this culture of evaluation and work together. So bring your teams, bring your people. It's going to be amazing, and I know that I'm biased, but it is going to be amazing. And then I will actually be also sharing some excerpts from our new book in the Kirkpatrick series, Building a Culture of Evaluation. So you get that, plus sneak peeks into some ways that we're updating the model that you'll see in 2026. That is actually the in-person version of what we do online, which we have a Kirkpatrick community you could be part of, where you get exclusive events. Next week, we're having our psychometrician on talking about validity and triangulation and AI and how all of those things play together. We've got discussion forums. You have access to us and our library of resources. By the way, that photo in the middle was from our summit last year. It looks like a whole lot of fun. We, of course, have certification programs to support you all. We've got our bronze program where you architect evaluation plans, our silver program where you analyze data, and then our newest one, performance designer, which is all about Kirkpatrick enabled instructional design. Of course, we have a toolkit that you all can have access to our tools and all of that stuff. And finally, the most fun thing that we have is our podcast, available on our YouTube channel, the Kirkpatrick Partners YouTube channel, or wherever you grab your podcasts. We are currently on a break, but we will be kicking off again in August with the next season. So with that, we've got about 4 minutes left, which means I've got 4 more minutes to answer your questions. Jennifer, you live in Dulles. Come on down to not The Price is Right, but that would be fun. But come on down. Let's go. Okay, so what other questions do you have? Just see if we answered all of these in the chat. Okay, we did. Perfect.
Vanessa, there is one more in the chat that I am scrolling back to. It
That's
was
such a great
from,
conversation.
yeah, from Sonia. Do you have any tips on how to come up with meaningful questions to ask? I think this was in regards to surveys.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so, um, yes, so there are, we go into this in our bronze program, right? So there's this concept of trainer-centered questions versus learner-centered questions, right? So really thinking from the perspective not of, let me actually just scroll to the next slide. If you want to connect with me, that's my LinkedIn. I just wanted to make sure y'all had that in case you need to leave a little bit early. So really putting yourself in the mindset of your end audience when it comes to the questions and thinking about the types of questions and how many, right? And so really think, if I only have 5 questions, the amount of football that's happening in this chat, I'm obsessed. If we only had 5 questions to ask, what are the things that we want? It's the same thing that I ask my subject matter experts, by the way, when I do instructional design. You have 3 slides. What are your most 3 important things? And that's all you get. So I can cut down their content. So you want to think in that same way. And also do not add too many qualitative questions, right? I made that mistake. Qualitative data is where the magic really does happen, but when you overload the survey with qualitative data, you actually get a negative return and people don't give as great feedback. And also really utilize mixed methods. So surveys is only one source of truth. You need to triangulate your data. So you need to pull in other ways to validate. And that's where I love interviews and focus groups and really talking to people. If you want me to fill out a survey, I'm gonna fill it out. If you want me to fill out if you want my opinion on something or my feedback on something, get me on a call and I will answer your questions in way more depth than I will ever write it into a survey. And so really thinking about that and how can I balance both. Awesome. Well, Sonia, I would love to see you at a future session as well. And we definitely go into more detail. Fred, I will make sure that the link to our toolkit is included with the slide deck that comes out. Well, that's all for me. I want to thank you all and thank you to Intellum for having me. It's been wonderful working with you all. You've been amazing. And yeah, I just, please connect with me. I love to chat more about all things Kirkpatrick all the time.
Love it. Thank you, Vanessa, so much for bringing your enthusiasm, your passion, your excitement for what you do, and just like Sonia said, for going into so much detail. So we really appreciate your time this morning, and we look forward to folks following up with you.
Thank you.
All righty. Take care, everyone. Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye.